Being a red-pilled atheist in 2025 is a really weird feeling. With the Trumpster winning back the White House, there's definitely been both a cultural and a political shift to the right side of the aisle and more conservative politics. And with that, I've seen kind of a reemergence of Christian belief, which is funny considering how Andrew Tate seemed to convert a lot of young men over to Islam just a couple of years ago, but I digress. As someone who's an atheist, meaning I don't believe in the literal existence of a god, but also as someone who's been positively influenced by more modern conservative ideas, I'm having a really hard time reconciling how religion and politics tend to go hand in hand on the right. It's almost like being a Christian is a prerequisite to being a conservative. And I find it really interesting how these days conservatives take a lot of pride in free thought, free speech, critical thinking. But when it comes to their religion, they immediately revert back to faith-based thinking. And I'm having a hard time reconciling that. This isn't meant to harass or insult anybody who believes, because I've long since got over my anti-theist stance. I used to be a lot more militaristic with my atheism. I would actively pursue debates and arguments about God because I was truly fascinated with the subject. But I definitely fell into the trap that a lot of new atheists tend to fall into, where we develop an enormous ego and a sense of intellectual superiority over religiously minded people, and that's definitely the wrong way to go about it. It's not a good way to make friends. At this point, I am very secure in my beliefs, or rather the lack thereof, to the point where I don't feel the need to defend or argue for it, even though I'm more than happy to have a debate. It's actually one of the few topics where I feel so confident and well-versed in it that I could absolutely handle myself in a debate setting versus a theist. I would actually love the opportunity to do that if it ever comes up. I think that would be a lot of fun. This also isn't meant to convert anybody to atheism, but I do have a challenge to some of the more open-minded Christians who might be questioning things. You know the old adage that every Christian grapples with their faith. And if this doesn't appeal to you, then by all means, don't feel obligated to do it. But if you're open to it, I want you to ask yourself, why do you believe in God? What is the reason for it? This was the question that I was asked, and what led me down my path of actually questioning things and investigating things for myself instead of just taking it on faith. Having grown up in a religious household as a kid, I knew God was real because we just acted like he was real. We prayed to God. We said thank you before every meal. We just lived our lives as if God was watching over us all the time. And so he was real. And that was enough. But when I was finally asked, why do I believe? I really stopped and thought about it. And the only reason I believed was for all the reasons I just listed out. We just lived our lives as if God was real, and so it was. But once I started to really think about it, I realized I didn't have a good reason to believe. It was just because I was told. It's the exact same way that I don't have a good reason to believe in fairies or dragons or unicorns. Dare I say it, there's more evidence for those magical creatures than there are for a god. And once I came to that realization that I didn't have any good reason, it was very easy to stop believing. And of course, at that point, I started watching all the theist versus atheist debates. I got introduced to the Four Horsemen of Atheism, Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, and I think it was Dan Dennett, I think was the fourth. And I eventually found programs like the Atheist Experience with Matt Dillahunty, and it blew my mind because having lived my life as if God was real for so long and then having all this new information contradicting everything I used to believe, it was a trip, man. It was a trip, and it really expanded how I thought about not just this conversation, but also everything else. It opened the door to my skepticism, and now it lets me look at the world through a very skeptical lens. I don't take hardly anything on faith anymore. I don't see faith as a good thing. I equate faith with gullibility. It's gullible's written on the ceiling. Oh, really? I'm taking these words directly out of Matt Dillahunty's mouth. Faith is the excuse given in the absence of evidence, because if you had evidence, you don't need faith. Faith isn't a virtue. It's not a good thing. And when Christians say, oh, you just have to take it on faith, I can't do that. At this point, I am incompatible with Christianity, as weird as that sounds, with any religion, really. And to sort of pivot it back to the political angle, I'm noticing that conservatives and Republicans are really taking a stand for good things like free speech, critical thinking, and that's fantastic because I used to associate that crowd with not that. I used to associate them with bigotry. I used to be one of those Democrat liberal thinkers, right? Where I just had the worst idea about conservatives. And it was just because I never listened to them. I was in my own echo chamber, in my own thought bubble. And I guess I was just projecting onto them. But it wasn't until I started listening to what they were saying, I'm like, okay, they're just people. They just have different ideas about things. I don't have to agree with them, but they're not bad people. And the same is true for Christians in general. But it's just so interesting seeing that happening on the right side of the aisle, where free thinking and critical thinking is really taking over that side, yet they stop when it comes to God. It's very interesting, and I'm seeing it happen in real time, especially as I'm spending more time in those circles. I spend a lot of time on right-wing YouTube, a lot of red-pilled spaces. I consider myself a liberal, as weird as that sounds. I'm a based liberal. We could have a conversation about that in another video. This is more about the religious angle, but I'm just having a hard time reconciling it because people who have good ideas or a good way of thinking about one topic have a really bad way of thinking about another. It's interesting. But that's really all I wanted to talk about. Like I said, this isn't meant to try to convert anybody or upset anybody. I'm not trying to attack Christianity. It's just as somebody who has expanded my own mind and the ways that I think, it's just something I've noticed, and I wanted to bring it up in a video, maybe see what you guys thought about it. I can already sense all the Christians typing furiously in the comments, "I will pray for you." Thank you, I appreciate it. But yeah, I think I got everything off my chest. If this needs a part 2, I will make a part 2, but until then, see you guys later.